One of the most popular musicians from Van Halen was Sammy Hagar. He served as lead singer of the band for over a decade, replacing David Lee Roth. He and Eddie Van Halen became good friends, yet there was a looming regret Sammy Hagar has had since Eddie passed away in October of 2020. Let's look back at Van Halen's incredible legacy and what Sammy Hagar's huge regret was after Eddie's death. How Van Halen got its start. Eddie Van Halen and his brother Alex were the son of Dutch musician Jan Van Halen. As one would expect, they grew up loving music and learned how to play instruments and write songs. They formed a band in 1964 called the Broken Combs. They began performing at high school concerts and at local backyard parties. They went through several different name changes until settling on Van Halen in 1973. Previous names were Trojan Rubber Co., Genesis, and Mammoth. The name Van Halen was actually the choice of their singer, David Lee Roth. The band became a tour de force and were playing in clubs and concert halls with crowds that included thousands of fans. They were active from 1978 to 98 and put out 11 albums. They put out their 12th and final album, A Different Kind of Truth, in 2012. They took a hiatus in 1998 and reunited a few times during the 2000s and 2010s until Eddie Van Halen's death in 2020. Van Halen had several tours and became a worldwide phenomenon. Their first tour was the 1978 World Tour. They toured the US, Canada, several cities in Europe, and Japan. With Eddie's death in 2020, the band Van Halen has now come to an end. Nevertheless, it's likely their music will continue to live on for several generations to come. Apart from the Van Halen brothers, the band had several members who made it a success. While David Lee Roth became the initial lead singer that helped catapult the band to stardom, many fans also loved his replacement, Sammy Hagar. Before we tell you more about Sammy Hagar's one huge regret, be sure to give this video a like and subscribe to Factsverse if you haven't already. Sammy Hagar comes onto the scene. Sammy Hagar was born October 13, 1947, in Salinas, California. His life couldn't have been more different from Eddie Van Halen's. Unlike his later bandmate, Sammy didn't come from a musical family or even a stable one. His father, Bobby Hagar, was in and out of jobs and couldn't keep the family stable. He was a heavy drinker and often abusive towards his wife and children. Eventually, when Sammy was around 10, his mother left his father and decided to raise her children on her own. As a young boy, Sammy had to work several odd jobs, including delivering newspapers, mowing lawns, and picking fruit in fields. His escape was music, which he became passionate about. With his savings, he bought a $40 guitar and began teaching himself how to play it. He would also sneak into concerts of his favorite rock bands, including the Rolling Stones and Dick Dale. After graduating from high school, he decided to move to Riverside, California to pursue music. He played in a variety of bands and began honing his musical talents. But none of these bands became hugely popular. He eventually returned to Fontana with his wife and children. He hadn't given up on his dreams to pursue a career in music. He claims one night he had an experience where he felt that mystical creatures were communicating with him, convincing him he was destined for stardom. He later met a psychic who convinced him to move to San Francisco to pursue his music career. He took the psychic's advice and began his career there. He first played in a band called Montrose and later had a solo career, but his big break came when singer David Lee Roth stepped down from Van Halen and the group was on the lookout for a replacement. Sammy Hagar served as the lead singer from 1985 to 96 and later again from 2003 to 2005. The band had a revival once he joined, and he helped continue their legacy after the ever-popular David Lee Roth stepped aside. During this time, he became one of the world's most prominent rock musicians, singers, and songwriters. He also developed a close friendship with his bandmate, Eddie Van Halen. Eddie Van Halen's life and legacy. Eddie Van Halen became interested in rock music during his teens. He was particularly inspired by the British invasion, bands like the Beatles, the Dave Clark Five, and the Rolling Stones. He taught himself music and started a band with his brother. His family lived together where he was born in the Netherlands and emigrated to the US in the early 1960s. Eddie grew up in California, and this was where he would spend much of his life. He also became responsible for helping create the popular rock music scene that came out of the Golden State. Naturally, it was a setback for Van Halen when David Lee Roth left the band, but Sammy Hagar was a great replacement, and he helped take the band to new heights. Eddie and Sammy became great friends. Eddie performed music for much of his life. While Van Halen didn't release an album after 2012, they would occasionally reunite for performances. Apart from his professionalism, Eddie Van Halen sadly had a few health problems. He began smoking and drinking during his teen years, and struggled with drug abuse and alcoholism for much of his life. These led to serious health problems. They eventually took their toll. He was hospitalized in 2019 after suffering from throat cancer for a few years. He died of a stroke on October 6, 2020, at age 65. He was surrounded by his brother and close family members, including his wife, Janie, ex-wife, Valerie Bertinelli, and his son, Wolfgang. Sammy Hagar's regret. After Eddie Van Halen's death, Sammy Hagar has one huge regret. He published his memoirs in 2011, and in it he discussed his relationship with Eddie. He has since expressed regret for discussing some of Eddie Van Halen's dark personality in the memoirs. He stated he regrets writing about Eddie's darker side now that he's gone, and if given the chance to rewrite the memoir, he would only portray his former bandmate in a positive light. The two of them had a falling out and had their issues while working together, which sometimes strained their friendship. Luckily, before Eddie's passing, the two met and put their differences aside. While Sammy wasn't there with Eddie during his final moments, the two of them were friends again and had made peace. Nevertheless, Sammy regrets what he wrote and felt there were some things better left unsaid. Both Eddie and Sammy led troubled but ultimately rewarding lives. They strived for excellence and achieved heights that few entertainers managed to reach. Now it's time to hear from you. What's your favorite Van Halen song? Let us know in the comment section below. And before you go, make sure you give this video a like and subscribe to Facts Verse if you haven't already. Click the bell icon to stay updated on all our latest content.